So as a pro rider, Graham, spent lots of my time training out on the open roads. It's fair to say I had my fair few run-ins with cars and a few accidents. One in particular I can remember was the Tour de France champion, 2012, heading out locally on the roads in Lancashire and got hit by a van that was coming out of a petrol station.
Like a lot of us, it can be impossible to avoid.
So there are always risks riding your bike out on the open road, and that's where our sponsors come in, CAMS. Cycling Accident Management Services help cyclists get back on the road, whether you're a pro rider, a weekend cyclist or a commuter. They work with local cycle shops to provide quick and hassle-free bike and helmet replacement, and they provide full legal services for any claim you might need to make. And if you've been injured, CAMS will help with all the rehab, including physiotherapy and psychological support to get you back on the bike. But what I love most about CAMS is that they are for cyclists by cyclists. They support the cycling community through partnerships with cycling events, pro athletes and men's and women's junior cycling teams. To find out more information about CAMS and other road traffic accident claims, visit the CAMS website or click the link in the show notes. Coming up in this episode...
Oh yeah, I was crying by the end. Yeah. I didn't go to... So yeah, normally I would have had to go to the podium or whatever for something, and I refused to go.
Do you remember me as a little 15-year-old Pippa?
Well, you weren't little then. You were already bigger than me.
And all I would do is ask you questions. What's it like to be a professional? What's it like? How do they let you know how to get to a race? You said they'd send you a fax. I'd ask you all these things just constantly, How do you take your leg warmers off in a race?
But that's the difference, so you meet the young riders who have that curiosity and that kind of willpower that they're going to be a pro.
And I can still remember the answers to your questions. I was asking you, how do I lose weight? Because look, I'm fat. I went like that. And you went, don't eat. Welcome to another episode of Cafe Aficionado. I'm Sir Bradley Wiggins. I'm joined as ever by my water carrier, my domestique, my lead-out man, Graham Wilgoss.
The Ted to your Ralph, if you're ever a fast show watcher.
My dog to my rabbit.
Yes.
And today's episode is one I'm looking forward to. It's someone who's played a huge part in my career. I've known her pretty much my whole career since I was 15. She went by the name of Robert Millar. Cycling fans will remember her as, but now goes by the name of Pippa York. It is the great Pippa York, because of course her palmarès is one to be admired, and I'm really looking forward to today's show.
Let's just revisit the palmarès while we're here, Brad. Second at the Giro overall, second at the Vuelta, twice Tour of Britain winner, then known as the
Kellogg's Tour.
The Kellogg's Tour, of course, and possibly most famous for being King of the Mountains at the Tour de France in 1984, where she finished fourth overall, and we'll come to this, but the first person to match her was, of course, you in 2009.
But a remarkable bike rider, a remarkable person, and incredibly inspirational on all parts.
Absolutely. Bit of business. While we're here, hit follow on Cafe Aficionado wherever you get your pods. Watch us on YouTube at Sir Brad's Cafe and join us on all the usual social platforms, also at Sir Brad's Cafe. So we're in the Pyrenees today, Brad.
We are.
The Col du Tourmalet, first used in 1910. It's the most used climb at the Tour de France. This year will be its 90th appearance. The centrepiece of the Circle of Death.
And for those people that are not unaware of what the Circle of Death is, what is it, Graham?
Four of the most grisly mountains used in the Tour or in the Pyrenees. The Col du Bisque, the Périssord, the Col d'Aspin, and the crowning glory of the Circle of Death is the Col du Tourmalet. It has only been used as a summit finish 3 times over, however. One you're very, very familiar with as well. There are 2 approaches to the Tourmalet, we should say. It tends to be one that comes in the middle of a stage. So one is from, and you know this, Le Saint-Sever.
And the other side, which goes through La Mongie.
It does from Saint-Marie-de-Campagne. So the first is 18.6 kilometres long at an average of 7.4% for a total of 1,404 metres of climbing. The second approach is 17.1 kilometres with an average of 7.3%. Slightly less climbing in this one, 1,268 metres for all the statos out there. So it was only right that we get the greatest climber of her generation to join us for this one.
Yeah. So today on Cafe Aficionado, I'm very, very pleased to welcome someone who I looked up to tremendously in my teens, when I was getting into cycling. Someone I spent a lot of time around with as a junior when you were the national road coach for the British Cycling. But above all, when I finished fourth in the Tour de France in 2009, I said to Ned Boulting on the Champs-Élysées, I'd equalled the great Robert Millar's fourth place of 1984 and surpassed the even greater Tommy Simpson's fifth place in 65 or 62, I think it was. It's a great pleasure to welcome Pippa York to the show. Pippa, welcome to Cafe Aficionado.
Thank you for having me.
And Pippa, just in case any cycling fans are listening in or watching and know you as Robert Millar, you used to be Robert Millar when you were riding, and you are now known as Pippa York. So we're going to clear that up straight away.
And thank you for reminding me.
Just for the avoidance of doubt. Anytime. And that's the most useful thing I will do on this podcast.
It's not a problem to refer back to when I was a cyclist. It's okay.
Great. So, Brad, we're in the Pyrenees today.
Yeah, we are.
For
the Col du Tourmalet.
The Tourmalet.
The famous Col du Tourmalet.
Typically one that comes in the middle of a stage, being, as we said, right in the middle of that circle of death. So it's only right that the greatest climber of her generation joins us for this one. Pippa, I've got to ask you, first of all, give us the view from the saddle. What's it like to ride the Col du Tourmalet? And then a sub-question here. We're bringing you in because it was your first, or it featured in your first Tour de France stage win in 1983, as well as your final Tour de France stage win in 1989.
So I have a bit of history there.
A little bit of history.
So when I get up in the morning and the Tourmalet is on the menu, I think I am going to add my name to the first person to the top, because the list is quite exclusive. And as a climber, you want to be part of that kind of group that's been over the top first. So I would be extra motivated for that day. And if it was the side from Barège, I would be really comfortable with that side. The other side, a little less, but I'd probably make the first group.
So how soon do you sort of go full gas up the Tourmalet?
Well, that depends on the side. So if you're on the Barège side, the south side, you're going to have to ride flat out through Barège, because the brake is going to go then on those big long straights where you can see the top, and there's not very many candidates or volunteers to attack then, because it's something like, I think it's 12 kilometers from there, and there's big long straights, and it's a little bit of a headwind until you get to the kind of first corner. But the first corner is miles away.
And it's a 17 point something kilometre climb, 17.4
yeah,
kilometre
something
climb?
like that,
Yeah. Brad, let's get the view from the saddle from your side of things. You've ridden it, I want to say 5 times?
Yeah, I think the year in 2012 when we did the Col du Tourmalet was actually traced the same route that you won your stage into Luchon. Mm-hmm. So we went over the Tourmalet from the Barège side, down the other side, and then that long climb up the Péresaude from the other side through the trees.
Yeah.
And then the long descent into Luchon.
Yeah.
And I can remember watching, not when I was 3 years of age, because it was in 1983, but in certainly my teens, with the, Phil Liggett's commentary when you attacked Lucio Herrera on that final.
It was Jimenez I was with.
Jimenez, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can still remember Phil Liggett's commentary, because it was your first stage win, and of course you ran for Peugeot in them days.
Yeah.
And it was a very anglophone team as well. Piper, Yates.
Yeah, there was a lot of there was a lot of kind of English speaking. Stephen Roach was there.
Yeah. So
there was it was the arrival of that kind of anglophone thing going on. But the interesting thing about is when I dropped Jimenez is so I let him ride most of the kind of way up Péresaude after we'd shared the work during the stage, but I got to Péresaude and I got told that Pascal Simon was coming up behind, so I was allowed to sit on.
Yeah.
And at first Jimenez was going really well, and I thought, well, this isn't a done deal. And then I started riding up beside him just to annoy him, and then eventually he got slower and slower. So by the time I attacked him at the top, he was completely dead. But I stuck it on the big ring with about 300 meters to go just to intimidate him. And I was probably going 35k an hour at the top. Really impressive.
It's a pretty straightforward descent then into Luchon, isn't it? Down that side.
Yeah, it's not too scary. I wasn't that comfortable in the descent.
No.
Because I wasn't fresh. But you can pedal most of it.
Yeah.
It's the one that Chris Froome sat on the...
Yeah, on the top tube, yeah.
Sat on the top tube and did that crazy pedaling. So yeah, it was a good day.
Can we fast forward and sort of use as our centre point for this particular episode, 1989. and your win in the stage that featured the Tourmalet that year. And we need to put this into a little bit of context as well, because it was you going head to head with Pedro Delgado after the 1985, I'm going to call it the Stolen Vuelta. Fair to call it that?
Yeah.
Tell us first of all, Pippa, a little bit about Delgado beating you by 36 seconds in 1985 to steal the Vuelta when he wasn't even in contention for the GC. He was 6 minutes plus down, and because of a mixture of things, bad management, sort of rival teams colluding with each other, and basically everyone ganging up on you, you had the Vuelta swept from under your feet.
What can I add to that? You summed it up nicely. That's what happened. I punctured at the bottom of I think there was 2 cols to go after the one where I punctured at the bottom. And then the other guys attacked because they were tired of the year before Eric Carritou had won, and the Spanish didn't want another non-Spanish rider winning. So they were pretty annoyed. So when I punctured at the bottom of the climb, already the team had made the mistake of my teammates riding the time trial the day before flat out because they wanted to win the team prize as well, instead of thinking ahead and having guys available in case there was a panic stations. So then I used up all my teammates to get back. Well, there was 3 of them left at the bottom before I even punctured. So I used up, I think Pascal Simon was the last one I used up to about a kilometre from the top of that climb. And then I had to sprint to close 30 seconds and over the top, and I just got on at the top. And then after that, it was complete chaos because I never saw anybody again that I kind of recognised. And when the team, when Roland Berlon tried to negotiate with the other teams, all the options were taken.
Was it difficult to contain your emotions in that sort of situation?
Oh yeah, I was crying by the end. Yeah. I didn't go to. So normally I would have had to go to the podium or whatever for something, and I refused to go. I didn't go, so I got fined.
Worth it?
But I don't know. The interesting thing about it is there was no doping control that day.
Yeah.
So, and the guy who, Riccio won.
How much were you fined, by the way?
Oh, 200 Swiss francs or something like that.
A lot of money in those days.
They have to pay for the 5-star hotel somehow, don't they, with the Worlds?
The Vuelta was a very different race back then, though, wasn't it? It's a bit like the Giro we were talking to Stephen Roach about. It was an Italian race. The Vuelta back then was a very Spanish race, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was not as international as it is now.
No, and it was only, you only went there kind of, I don't know, as some kind of prep race for the tour, to see how you were doing.
Well, it was in May then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
April, May. So there was days when it was freezing cold.
Yeah.
There's pictures of us in the woolly hat on and the big gloves and the woolly jersey.
And so picking yourself up for 1989 and bringing it back to the Tourmalet where you've got Delgado, bit of a revenge mission at that point?
No, I never had any kind of beef with Pedro. He was a honest enough rider. He was the recipient of the circumstances where he won that race. I didn't have any problems with him.
So wasn't that rivalry was something that was really a construct of the media, the TV?
Yeah, because the year at that I lost that Vuelta, as you're calling it.
Yeah.
I went back and it was the Volta Catalunya, which is their second biggest race, and I won that from Sean Kelly. So I wasn't that, you were annoyed at the time, but you give it a couple of days and you process it and you move on. You've got no choice. You got done over. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your memories of '89 and watching Pippa on the road.
Well, that was. I mean, I hadn't really started watching cycling at that point, but I watched that race to death in latter years. In my teens, and of course, it's all most memorable. Remembered for the Le Mans Fignon battle.
Yeah.
And the time trial in Paris. There was 5 time trials in that tour. With the team time trial prologue, and 3 individual time trials. One of which was 75 kilometres, which is quite something really. There was a lot of time trial in that tour, and Fignon was on the way back, having won a couple of tours in the early 80s, and he was riding for a very strong System U team. But
But Greg was smarter.
Yeah. That's what Stephen said to us. Funnily enough, he said he was a master tactician on the road.
Yeah, Greg was smarter, and he had better so he had better technology with the Scott bars that he was using.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, at Z Peugeot, we were kind of caught in this place of who do we ally ourselves with in that kind of fight to try and win a stage. So one day I would be told, go and ride on the front because, Fignon needs a hand.
Yeah.
And the next day, go and ride on the front because we're trying to sign Greg LeMond.
Yeah, well, he did come to the team the year after.
Yeah,
didn't he?
so
you rode in his service when he won the second tour, didn't you?
Yeah.
Third tour.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was he like, Greg?
Bit of a hypochondriac.
Was he?
Always fiddling with his shoes because he's got one foot bigger than the other. Always kind of slightly worried about, because when he's race leader, there's that whole panic about they're going to poison me or give me food, give me crap food or whatever. So fairly filled with worry and anxiety, I would say, as soon as he starts racing.
Did you sense at that time what an innovator he was and what a maverick he was? Like how we look back on him now. Because he was on the brink of something special there with what he was bringing into the sport, wasn't he?
Yeah, he. If it wasn't for Greg, the salaries wouldn't have went up straight away, because he came from America and their sports people get paid decent money. So when Greg arrived and he got something like $1 million for a 2 or 3 year contract, everybody else went, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
It's all right paying him that much, but you're paying us £800 a month in a sense.
Yeah.
You're going to have to cough up. So there's the thank of that. But he also brought a number, so Oakley and all those guys. He brought that, I think it was Bell helmets. So he brought all that technology over to Europe. And because we spoke English, we were kind of the first ones to adopt all that stuff.
1989 as well, that stage to Super Bagneras, you were the first over each of the climbs that day. So so you took the Souvenir Jacques Godet.
Probably, yeah.
The only British rider to have done so.
That would have been an objective. Because when we went over it in 83, it was the pre-Jacques Godet as well. And I'd agreed with Jimenez to let, because he was killing me. So I agreed with him he could go over the top first, but they put the banner for the Jacques Godet thing about 100 metres before, so I thought the Jacques Godet prize was going to be there. So I sprinted for that to do him over for the, I think it was 5,000 francs or something. True professional. He was an amateur. He didn't need the money. And Jimenez thought I was attacking him, so he came roaring past me, So I blew my brain 100 metres from the top, just about stopped. And he came sprinting past, really annoyed, and he didn't wait for me. So when I caught him on the descent, I attacked him straight away because he was kind of frightened, being a Colombian, going downhill. And I only let him catch me down the bottom. So we kind of exchanged blows of, don't do that to me again. And then the second time, I thought, I said to him, so I was with Charlie Motet for most of the Tourmalet. And he kept telling me to slow down because I was killing him.
Yeah.
Because my objective was to get to the top of Tourmalet as fast as I could. So he said, if you slow down, you can go over the top of all these ones, but you need to think there's 2 calls after this. And then when Delgado came across over the top of Tourmalet and on the approach to Aspin, that kind of changed the whole dynamic. So then there was another conversation with Pedro about, well, I'm not going to ride because both of you are riding GC.
Yeah.
I'm just riding for the stage and trying to take the jersey. So he agreed that we would combine our forces and.
I was fascinated that you've got enough puff to sort of have a bit of a chat on the way up these climbs.
Oh no, this was on the flat before the climb.
Righto.
But I would have just have sat on if with those two. I was okay with Motet because I thought I'll drop him on the last climb, and I'll let him do more work in the valley because that's what he does, and I'll just say I can't pass. But when Delgado arrived, it changes the dynamic because behind that meant that Fignon and LeMond and all those guys, Rooks and Tunis, it changed their tactics for the day. So instead of it being a kind of climber's day and Motet just happened to be with me, it became a GC day, and it changes the whole dynamic of how do I win that stage without getting involved in what they're doing.
Yeah. It's amazing the era you're involved in. Some of the names you're reeling off there, it's just, it takes me back to my childhood watching them all. The amount of times you encountered Pedro Delgado, And even I can remember back to 1993 where you both went over the Col de la Bonnette together.
Yeah.
In your last tour.
Yeah.
You were with Delgado then.
Yeah, so the first tour I rode in 83, we were somewhere near Le Mans or somewhere like that in kind of western France. And there was a break one, and there was 3 of us, and one of them was Pedro.
Yeah.
So we were in the break, even though eventually we got caught back because it didn't kind of go anywhere. But we always kind of found ourselves around about each other.
He's coming today, actually.
Is he?
No,
He's here now. No.
He's here
No,
tonight.
because the thing is, he could be because his son works in London.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
Well, Miguel's son used to work in Rafa as well in London.
Okay.
In Geraint. But towards the end of his career, obviously he was playing second fiddle to Miguel, wasn't he? When Miguel sort of came up, you raced with both those, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I could see you in Geraint in the front. I didn't really race with him very often.
No. But the era you crossed quite a few different tour generations there with Eno, the Delgado and Roach years, and then Indurain at the end, didn't you?
I even saw Zotomilk and Moser,
Yeah.
De Vlamic,
Yeah.
Polentier, all those animals.
Amazing.
Let's wind it back to 83 for your first stage win. What are your memories, what are your standout headline memories from 1983?
Just how fast I was going when I attacked it on top of Perisord. It was just ridiculous.
It was ridiculous.
It was just, it was just 35k an hour at the top, and God knows how many meters of climbing it is.
Yeah.
But it's really impressive. I thought, I'm going really fast here.
So you would have led over the Tourmalet, the Aspan, and the Perisord that day?
No. The little Colombian led over the first couple because he was trying to do the Climbers Prize. So he took the jersey that day.
Okay.
And I thought, he's going to kill himself to take the jersey this day. And in a couple of days' time, he's going to fall apart because we're going to come into those horrible transition days where it's up and down and it's roasting hot. And he's going to blow his brain. And he did. So I took the jersey a couple of days later.
And you descended to win that day solo.
Yeah.
You were a great descender as well as I
was desperate.
Excellent climber.
I think that's the word. I didn't know the descent. We'd done, I think in the recce, we'd done the other side, or we'd got off at the top of Perisord because the weather was too bad and the road wasn't fully open. So I hadn't done the descent, so I didn't know it. So I pedalled as much as I could.
Was there a side to you when you were riding that you kind of relished making other riders suffer? You knew as a climber you were that much better than them.
On the days when I woke up and I thought, right, this is my day, I would be really pleased if the peloton set off like the finish was around the corner, because they tried to do that to wear you out. And I would just sit at the back of the peloton, and sometimes it'd be in a line out, and I think, yeah, I'm okay, and I'd see the other guys attacking and whatever, trying to get away, and they're all trying to follow the moves because they're not so sure they're going to win that day. So when they made it really hard at the start, I used to think, go for it, because as soon as we come onto the bottom of the climb, I'm going to take my revenge on you, because they're going to need that time to settle into pulling that big gear while I've sat on the wheels and used the smaller gear as I could. But it wasn't a kind of case of, I think that development of hurting your rivals only kind of became apparent when I became more of a rival with Bernardino, and he would hurt you just because he could. He could hurt you anywhere. So when you saw him suffering, I would go and ride on the front, so he suffered a little bit more. And he would hate that, and that would please me, because he would take his revenge 2 days later, and we'd be in the gutter for 20 kilometres.
It's always feel a little bit easier as a rider when you know, even though you're hurting, if you know someone else is hurting that little bit more.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's easy to forget when you're in the moment. You forget. You think you're the only one, and most people are very good at hiding and masking it. But
it's when they ask you if you can slow down a bit, and you kind of slow down a bit, then you speed up again.
Yeah, you know you've got them.
Yeah, you're kind of they're not going to be.
Yeah, or you go around a hairpin bend and you can look down at the back of the group and just see who's
dangled.
Yeah, who's dangling, and
Well, we've got a few more stories of hangers-on on the Tourmalet, as well as a story of woe and one of the greatest solo rides ever from who else? Eddie Merckx coming up.
Hi, I'm Bradley Wiggins, Olympic champion and the first British cyclist to win the Tour de France. I've been a professional cyclist for most of my life, and I take every element of my training and preparation seriously, so I understand the importance of finding the right sports nutrition products. For me, I only want the very best products, backed by science and trusted by the world's best athletes, which is why I've joined the team at Applied Nutrition. Whether it's their electrolyte tablets, isotonic energy gels, and recovery protein, Applied Nutrition products are designed to support cyclists across every stage. Their range has been sampled and refined in real endurance conditions like the Tour of Britain, and every batch of their endurance range is tested for banned substances, making it a trusted choice for cyclists at all levels. Now, here's the good bit. I've got a special offer for Cafe Aficionado listeners. Use the code SIRBRAD30, that's SIRBRAD30 on your next order, and you'll receive 30% off. So shop now on appliednutrition.uk and use the code SIRBRAD30, that's SIRBRAD30, for 30% off your next order. Fuel your moment with Applied Nutrition.
Pippa, Brad, let's get into the history of it, of the Col du Tourmalet. Starting in 1913, Eugene Christophe lost the Tour. It was his best chance to win the race when his fork broke on the descent. He was leading by 18 minutes, but lost several hours as he walked down the descent in the hope of finding someone to fix his bike. Brad, you never have to worry about anything like this, fortunately.
No.
Because in this particular era, you had to be self-sufficient. So he found a forge, and was able to fix his bike himself, but lost the race. That's our starting point. 1969 is where we're going to fast forward to, and Eddy Merckx leading a group up the Tourmalet, including Roger Pignon, Raymond Polidor, en route to winning the first of his 5 tours. Brad, special mention for Eddy Merckx here.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of his most memorable victories. He was only young at the time, the first of his 5 tour wins. And I think he went solo to the finish, didn't he? An amazing ride, which is still talked about to this day. Remind us how many kilometres solo he did, Graham?
Oh, great question. But he attacked we'll come back to that one. We'll get Luca, our researcher, on it straight away. He attacked just below the summit and rode 140 kilometres solo to victory, 8 minutes ahead of the chasing pack. We should also mention, while we're here, your 1984 Tour de France stage win, which we've glossed over, but an important one to mention. Tourmalet didn't feature, but that was a monster of a day, 226.5 kilometres.
If you say so.
I do, yes. To Gouzet-Neige.
Yeah.
Was that your best tour? Obviously won the King of the Mountains prize, 4th place overall.
Yeah, probably was. It wasn't my best Grand Tour. No.
But best Tour de France.
It was my best Tour de France, yeah.
Did you think it would be your best tour at that time?
Yeah.
You did?
Because so from 83, I thought I could wear the climber's jersey. So into the winter, step up another couple of percent on to everything. So it wasn't a surprise. I wasn't surprised. I'd done the work.
Do you think your focus for the Mountains Prize and going over those climbs in first to get your name on those lists damaged your chances on GC, or do you think that they kind of went hand in hand, or?
Oh, at the time, you had to kind of concentrate on both. So you were generally in the front group if you were doing the Climbers Prize. Yeah, some races it would have its toll, but quite often I would do the sprint for the points at the top of a mountain, and then I would accept that for the next 100k I was going to be hurting because I was never going to recover from that effort. So I'd be quite surprised sometimes that I actually didn't get dropped later on.
That brings me to 2009. So one of the times that you've done it in your career, Brad. 2009, you finished in the pack with Lance all the way down. Didn't have to do any more, as long as you were. I mean, you were all marking each other out by that stage. Memories of that one?
I mean, I remember just being really comfortable all the time in the climb. It's the first tour that I'd made the grade, and I was in the front. The Pyrenees came first that year in the tour. We did the Pyrenees first, so the Pyrenees, there wasn't much action in there. and because Lance was in the race as well, he was very much he was unsure how far he'd go into the race, how well he was going to perform with Contador in the team. So the Pyrenees really was just a controlling affair of getting through it and waiting for the Alps.
And then 2010, stage 16, won by Andy Schleck.
Yeah. I struggled that tour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slightly different story.
And I just remember it being really foggy all the way up, and you couldn't see, the visibility was low. They weren't letting that many crowds up the top because of the weather. So it was a bit of a dampened affair all round.
Yeah, Schleck and Contador finished on the same time that day. And then 2012, your defining year.
Yeah. That was the stage to Luchon that we went over. We let the brake go and we rode tempo up the whole thing. Christian Nice went over the top in front. We kept as many bodies down the valley to the start of the next climb, by which time Liquigas took over and Basso was attacking and Nibali. And then we arrived, 3 of us in Luchon, me, Froome and Nibali.
38-man breakaway that day.
Yeah.
Which you don't tend to see the big breaks anymore, do you?
No, but that's soon whittled down when you get over these climbs.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can take half the breakaway away as soon as you hit them. Like, they're just looking to get sliding space so they don't end up in the gruppetto, so they got something to talk about at dinner. You know?
Won by Tommy Vockler, we should say as
Thomas.
well. The Thomas,
He hates being called Tommy.
the housewife's favourite.
Thomas.
And then 2019, Thibaut Pinot, the last summit finish on the Col du Tourmalet. Pippa, were you on comms by this time?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't covering the tour, but I was watching it, and you could see that Pinot he had to win that stage. You know, France wouldn't have forgiven him if he hadn't won.
And you had Julien Alaphilippe in the yellow jersey that day, and that was the day that Geraint Thomas started to crack as well.
Yeah.
He's near the top.
Started to slip and slide back down the peloton.
I was on the motorbike that day. Yeah. I remember going up it now. Now you're talking about it.
Yeah, Geraint started getting dropped on that kind of, as you head towards the rock face.
It's a long hard climb.
2.5k to go.
Yeah.
As a climber or as a GC rider, when you know you're approaching the sort of circle of death, what's the kind of atmosphere in the team bus? What's the atmosphere in the team?
Did you ever have team buses, Pippa? You missed that era, didn't you? Team buses.
We had them at TVM.
TVM.
TVM had one, but by then, that it wasn't the same standard as it is now.
What's the atmosphere? I mean, it's
anxiety.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, I've had it in different situations. When I was at Garmin, it was just festivities. It was let's take it on, because we were taking on the Armstrongs and Contadors. And any result was a bonus, under Jonathan Wouters. But at Sky, it was very much business-like. And so much so that I forgot we'd been over the Tourmalet. There wasn't a big deal made about it. It was just another climb. And every climb was just another climb. And it was bringing it back to, you just got to sit at 400 watts at the weight you're at, and we'll ride tempo. And it'll drop from the back. And less bringing up the fact of this is the Tourmalet and the fear around that. It was just another climb. I think that served me well personally, not getting into the remembering why we were there and the occasion, because that was where my downfall was realising what we were about to accomplish.
So again, the whole circle of death thing, more of a media kind of construct than it is as a racer. You're just taking it climb by climb.
There's riders who are frightened, they won't make the time.
Yeah.
If you've any kind of weakness on a stage like that and you get in trouble on the first call, and if it's the Tourmalet, you're going to be at 20 minutes at the top. And then you've only got 25 minutes or so of kind of sliding room to make the time cut. So usually in our era, we would be told to follow the moves if there was any kind of big GC kind of sort out or whatever we were doing, but not to upset our guys who were thinking, I'm going to be on the gruppetto from the first group and we're going to be surviving. So there'd be that kind of feeling in the peloton as if somebody attacks and 3 guys go away, just let them go, and we'll all stay together and survive this.
And does it depend on the order, or is there a particular climb in among the circle of death that is which one stands out? Is there one in particular?
Probably the Tourmalet, because it's so intimidating when you're at the bottom and especially the Barège side where you can see the top, and it's in the clouds maybe. It's more intimidating. Whereas the other side, it has the feed zone at the bottom, and you can get dropped there through the feed zone. It's so hard, and then you can kind of settle into it.
And you've also got the ski village to break it up, La Mongie. You know, you kind of that breaks
it's
up.
a landmark.
It's a landmark.
Yeah.
Well, it gets harder from then.
It does.
You've done the avalanche tunnels, and that's the hardest bit before you get to the village. And then in the village, you've got to survive that last 4 or 5 kilometers with the side wind.
Was there a point for either of you where you kind of thought, blimey, I'm taking on one of the biggest climbs, one of the most famous climbs at the Tour?
Not approaching it, but when we went over the summit, because it's such a famous summit with a brick wall on the right hand side, you know, it just sort of funnels, and then it's like a, you know, them swimming pools you get in hotel, you know, that just slip away. What are they called?
Oh, what, the infinity pool?
Infinity pool. You know, the roads like that, it just goes over them.
Yeah, you've just got time to get.
And when you go over that, you know, I always picture, you know,
it's in black and white usually.
Stages I've watched as a kid, you know, people coming over that climb, and it reminds you get thrust back into the moment as to why you're there and what this is. But on the approach, like most things we did in 2012, we took the emotion away from it and didn't think this is the Tourmalet. What's it all about? It's just this climb is 17k long at this percentage, and this is what we got today. You know, you almost take the names away from it.
Is that the same for you, Pippa? And ever a moment where you sort of thought, this is sensational, I've got everyone on toast, I'm on top of I'm literally and figuratively on top of the world?
Yeah.
While you were doing
as
it?
Bradley says, you know, you have those iconic black and white images of people with, you know, they've got 2 gears on their bike and they have to turn the wheel around and they're going over the top, and you're in exactly the same situation. The road hasn't got any wider. It's in better condition now. But when you look at the kind of vista that you have as you approach it, you recognize it's historic. And then as you go over the top, you just got about time to, you know, grab the bars because it's straight into the descent.
Same roads.
Same road, same corners where you know, the water running across, in the same place you could crash as the other famous kind of riders have done before.
Should we do the ultimate cyclist? Should we move it on? Do the ultimate cyclist. Brad, do you want to lay down what the ultimate cyclist is all about this time?
So the ultimate cyclist is, we're going to pick out 10 traits, 10 characteristics that build up the ultimate cyclist. So it's kind of a
Frankenstein's monster of a cyclist. So Pippa, because you know, as I introduced you at the top, as the greatest climber of your generation, we thought the facet that we would choose for this particular episode would be the climber. So if you could pick one climber to put their climbing ability into this Frankenstein's monster of a cyclist, then who would the climber be? I'm going to say you can't pick yourself.
No, I wouldn't pick myself.
So Brad, start us off with which climber would you put forward to be included in this Frankenstein's monster, the ultimate cyclist?
I'm going to go with Marco Pantani.
Of course. Difficult.
I watched him as a teenager break onto the Tour de France in '94, won at Alpe d'Huez. He surpassed the great Claudio Chiappucci in the Carrera team, and then went on to do what he did in the sport, and his tragic demise also. But I raced with Marco in my first Giro d'Italia in 2003. Marco was his last Giro d'Italia, and he was a shadow of the man that had won the Giro in '98 in the Tour. But nonetheless, to have raced and be able to tell my kids that I've raced with Marco Pantani, it's quite something.
Yeah.
So yeah, Marco for me.
Real legend. There's a great bit in the accidental death of a cyclist, one of the Marco Pantani films, where they talk about him as a youth rider. And his thing was he used to like to start at the back of the peloton as they were approaching the climb, just so that he could buzz past absolutely everyone on the climb and beat them all to the top.
Did you race with Marco, Pippa?
Kind of his thing.
Yeah.
So Marco Pantani is taken, Pippa. Who are you putting forward as your climber?
Lucien Van Imp.
Okay, Van Imp.
Yeah.
Why so?
Just because he won the Climbers Prize so many times, and there was no. He's in the era of Merckx as well, and O'Connor and those guys who would kind of try to burn him off. So when he won the Tour, it was a moment of where he was kind of guided into that by Guimard, and so I looked at him and I thought, yeah, I want to do with that. I want to be that kind of climber that doesn't burn you off before, you know, can ride a really high tempo, but can always do a sprint at the top. So there's a different kind of climbers.
Still the last unofficial Belgian winner of the Tour de France, isn't he?
Van Imp.
Yeah.
Yeah, he must be. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm the official.
You are the
official.
Yeah. Just to make that clear. Yeah. As a man who was born in Ghent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, for all of Van Imp's qualities and the era in which he rode, we can't not give it. I'm so sorry, Pippa, as our guest. So Marco Pantani as a climber goes into our ultimate cyclist. Please do check out our Frankenstein of an ultimate cyclist on our Instagram page at Sir Brad's Cafe, and tell us if we were right to choose the late great Marco Pantani as the best climber ever. Just on climbing very quickly, Pippa. At what point did you realise in your early career that you were an extraordinary climber?
Oh, probably about 3 months into my career when we did not Dauphiné, one of those races before.
Criterium International.
Criterium International. Yeah, it finished at the top of a hill. It was 2 stages, one in the morning and then one in the afternoon. In the morning one was finished on the top, middle of nowhere on this really steep hill. And I did a bit like Pantani did. I was picking people off as they got dropped from the bottom. And I was just going to say, that's quite a good thing for your confidence when you sit there.
Yeah.
And you can just go round the guys for letting the wheel go. And then you kind of know that you're on a good day. But you can't do that if you're riding GC because of the waste of energy. But as a climber...
Yeah, what was, did your weight change much from, say, 83 to your last year at TVM in 93? Because you were still climbing in the front.
No.
But I remember one of the things you got me doing when I was 17, when we were on the junior squad, was you were quite big into the weight training at that time and strength training.
I would do strength training in the winter. And my race weight always kind of stayed the same.
Yeah, even though you got stronger.
Even though I got stronger.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of kind of controlling.
Because you really believed in that, didn't you?
I think, I remember talking with Lance mentioned that he was doing weight training. And why wouldn't you? Because you have to be able to absorb all those shocks that you get. So you have to be physically strong in your core.
Yeah.
So it's more about that when you hit those bangs and holes and stuff it doesn't break you.
Yeah.
And also if you're with somebody who's the same kind of ability as you, and you know that they don't do weight training, but you do, you've got that kind of psychological thing as well. I'm harder than you. So.
One thing people won't know is you're a black belt, aren't you, in karate?
I'm a second dan in
taekwondo. Taekwondo. Was you doing that when you were cycling as well? Was that
no. I wanted to do something totally different from cycling when I stopped.
Yeah.
And I really liked the discipline.
Yeah.
And the kind of pathway was set out for you. So it wasn't like cycling at the time where you kind of had to discover all the things that you needed to know.
Yeah.
If you do a martial art, then everything's kind of laid out in front of you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really kind of matter if you've got poor flexibility, which you have as a cyclist. As long as you show the kind of proper character, then you kind of move up the ranks.
So Brad, Pippa, we have covered an awful lot of history in this episode of Cafe Aficionado, but I want to take you back to a particular prize-giving dinner in 1995.
30 years ago.
When you would have been...
15.
15 years old. And you were both present. Brad, you were there having won a British Champions jersey in the junior points race on the track. Correct.
Yeah.
Pippa, you were there...
National Road Race Champion.
National Road Race Champion.
And it was in Manchester, the Manchester Town Hall. And we all had a group photo at the end. And Sean Yates gave me my trophy that night. We only had 3 riders in the peloton at that time. Myself, Sean Yates and Chris Boardman. And so 2 of my heroes were in the room. And I think I got a photo with you in this group of us, all the British champions. It was lovely. Yeah.
Did you
remember that? Do you remember me as a little 15-year-old Pippa?
You weren't little then. You were already bigger than me. But that,
Yeah.
I remember we went for a bike ride with you and kind of stuck a half wheel on everybody.
Yeah. That was we did the Centre of Excellence things, didn't we?
Yeah.
West London, yeah.
And
all I would do is ask you questions.
Constantly.
What's it like to be a professional? What's it like? How do they let you know how to get to a race? You said they send you a fax. I'd ask you all these things just constantly, How do you take your leg warmers off in a race?
But that's the difference, so you meet the young riders who have that curiosity and that kind of willpower that they're going to be a pro.
David Miller came out with us riding, didn't he, as well? He
yeah, and
yeah.
David was a lot more flamboyant, so I don't know how much info you got out of him, but I would just,
I'd ring you up because I had your landline number and I'd ask you questions. Then we went to Lillishore and did that weight training session.
Yeah.
We went to the Worlds in San Sebastian, and I was just, I like a sponge for information.
But that's what you need to do, because if you're not going, so nowadays it's internet and you can get all the access, but before then you have to access it yourself and then process it for you.
I can remember just asking you, and I can still remember the answer to your questions. I was asking you, how do I lose weight? Because look, I'm fat. I went like that, and you went, don't eat. And then I said, how do you train for the speed in the last kilometre in a sprint? You went, sprint downhill.
Yeah.
I said, what if you run out of cadence? He said, well, then you're going fast enough.
Yeah.
It was just very simple. You simplified everything, and I could still remember that. Yeah.
I remember you asking me that about the doing slightly downhill with the tailwinds.
Yeah, I still remember all that. It was like a mental log.
So I think we can say probably it was good advice. What you were,
well, hopefully
these little pearls of wisdom that you were dishing out to Brad at the time.
As kind of national coach, you're there to help the riders that you want to be better than what you did. Yeah. So you're glad that the people surpass what you did, because you put yourself out there, but you know that as an athlete you had certain restrictions, and if somebody comes along like Bradley who's able to better that in certain aspects, then it's perfectly okay.
The other thing, when we went to the Worlds in San Sebastian, you didn't get out of bed all week. You used to just sleep all the time. And so I thought that's what you got to do. So I would just always be in my bed.
It would seem like that.
Because you would say you've got to rest. That's what you do. You don't want to be walking around. You want to save your legs.
Yeah, it would seem like that. But you didn't see me driving back to Biarritz every day to pick up riders who were coming and going and that kind of stuff.
And then do you remember riding the Tamworth 2-day with us? You rode with us in the juniors, and I just stayed on.
I remember
you
that.
showed us where to ride through and all this, and we would be moving up, and all these riders would be looking at us because we were juniors riding with seniors. And we felt protected around you, and no, we did. It was like having, it was just great. It was great. It was, it's why we're here today. Was lucky to have you. And
that's one of those things that when you kind of step into the pro world and somebody kind of mentors you. Yeah. Or you latch onto them because you think, they know what they're doing.
Was it obvious back when Brad was a junior and you were coach? Was it obvious that Brad had what it was going to take to make it?
I think you were the first one you'd had coaching most of the time. Yeah. So you were coming with that little bit of instinct and little bit of the ability was coming out, and everybody was, right, this is what you need to do. So and each little step that you took, you got better. Yeah.
But I was chunky and I had to lose weight, and that's what I remember.
Well, that's just the youngsters thing.
And I still remember. I remember being consciously thinking I was fat in San Sebastian because I got dropped up there. What's the famous climb on the San Sebastian?
Escabel.
And I remember saying to you, look, Robert, look at this. And you were saying, just stop eating. Simple.
Just stop
eating and ride your bike. So I did that all winter, and I lost weight, and I came back the next year and I was better on the road. But the thing that struck me the most there was Max Chandry was in our hotel, and you were chatting to him in reception. He'd just come back from Paris Tour where he finished second, and he'd ridden all the Tour de France to lose weight, and that was his Worlds he should have won in San Sebastian. He had these fancy wheels that he decided to use at last minute that folded in half. But Max was sat in reception, and he had a road map of Texas on his legs, the veins. Yeah. And I remember saying to you again, I was saying, look at his legs. Is that what I've got to be like? And you were like, that's what you've got to be like. Well, you said his legs like tracing paper. I still remember you saying he's like
you
like
can
a
see right
bumblebee,
from. But you would have ended up like that, So the years that you were really competitive, you would have ended up in that condition.
I know, and it was amazing to see it in the flesh. Just what it took to be a professional bike rider. And that was it. And some juniors had it in them to be inspired. Like, I'm going to go. That's why I'm going for.
Yeah, you probably in those years had that thing of I'd like to be a bike rider, but I'm going to be a bike rider. Yeah. And that's the kind of difference as you go through those levels, and it gets slightly harder each time, but you're improving. You think, I'm going to be a bike rider.
Yeah, and it was strange. We had someone like you there that was invaluable in my eyes as a junior, and within a year you'd gone. They got rid of you, and it was just it was a real shame because that's kind of what we needed. That was what
well, they took a different.
They did, yeah.
It's a different arrival of UK sport money. It needed medals, so it was a kind of political thing with Tony Blair and if we're investing in this, we need to see the the outcomes, and which was basically Olympic medals, and they're not going to win them on the road because there's not too many variables. So they concentrate on the track.
Yeah, it was good times.
We're surrounded at Cafe Aficionado by, or we've got in front of us, I should say, a few of Brad's favourite jerseys from his collection. Wanted to ask Pippa, where do you keep your King of the Mountains jersey from 1984?
It's in a suitcase in the loft. I think I've got 3 or 4 left, which are for my offspring. Mm-hmm. And when I'm no longer here, they can divvy them up in the way that they want. I think there's about 40 or 50. So you tend to keep your leaders' jerseys from it, and then I would keep a full team kit as well from each year.
And you've got a new book coming out.
Yeah, so I had a book out. I think it came out on sale today, called The Escape with David Walsh.
Right.
So going around with David Walsh, the kind of connection to Lance, but an interesting experience.
Which we'll have you back on to tell us all about when the tour is when your book tour has finished. Brad, a couple of quick fire final questions for Pippa to finish. What keeps you in love with cycling, assuming you are still or have ever been in love with cycling?
I just think the unpredictability of it, and I like that there's still the romantic side to it. So it's although it's went through that kind of phase of data counts for everything, you've still got certain riders who just throw themselves at it.
The heart rate monitor as opposed to the
so they're not always looking down to see what the output is. You know, I quite like to see when one of the top riders gets on the spare bike and he hasn't had time to take the computer, and then you can see them kind of processing it. But I still like the kind of romantic things like the top of Tourmalet where you go over and it's that historic view. I love all that stuff.
And stopping at cafes is a big part of going out on people's bikes. So what's your order when you stop at a cafe?
If it's the winter, it'll be a cup of coffee with milk and sugar. And if it's the summer, I'll have lemon tea. Right. But I have to have a bit of cake because otherwise I won't stop.
What's your cake of choice?
Lemon drizzle in the summer and coffee and walnut in the winter.
Season specific. That's the first time that we've had a season specific choice on Cafe Aficionado. All that's left to say, Pippa, is thank you for joining us on Cafe Aficionado. But before we go, one last question. Where is your favourite cafe?
I don't have one because I don't go out long enough to need a cafe stop anymore.
I'll do.
Yeah, so this, by dint of that, surely Cafe Aficionado is your favourite cycling cafe. Yeah.
It could well be.
Pippa, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Pippa.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bradley.
So that is it for today's episode. Thank you, Graham, as usual. And thank you, Pippa. It's been an absolute pleasure. Tune in for another episode of Cafe Aficionado, and thank you for joining us.